Joining us now is Trump Great America PAC co-chair, former Reagan campaign manager, Mr. Ed Rollins.
Good morning, dear. How are you?
One of my favorite people on planet Earth.
Well, you should have made the game end a little earlier last night, since I stayed to the bitter
You look
end.
awesome. I don't know what you're talking about.
Right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great game. Great game. Any of you missed it?
Let's talk about the budget. The budget vote in the House today, does it go through with flying colors? And I want to get to that.
It goes through with no Democrat votes, so it's hard to get flying colors. And there's a 22-vote margin that Republicans have. They passed their own budget with 18 defections. So I think it will pass because I think Republicans have decided this is so important to get not just the budget, but to get the tax plan. And they can't get the tax plan if they don't pass this. So I expect it to pass today without any more modifications.
Why is Kevin Brady, why are some members of the GOP even talking about messing with people's 401k contribution limits? Because again, front page of the Wall Street Journal says that House Republicans are still considering 401k changes in the tax overhaul, despite what President Trump said.
Well, speaking of the 22-vote margin, some want more of a fiscal responsible bill in which it all balances out somewhat, or they cut entitlements or a whole variety of things, and they can't just quite get the numbers to add up at this point in time. So right until the final passage of this tax bill, which will come, you're going to see this modification. I think original plan was to take the state and local taxes out as a deduction, and obviously there's a lot of opposition to that. So I think to a certain extent I don't think the 401ks will basically be touched. I think the president's made it very clear he does not want to do that. And I think there's a lot of political pressure not to do that. But I think at the end of the day, you're going to see this back and forth until the bill is finally
Here's
passed.
why I think that this is idiotic, stupid, moronic. I could go on.
All of the above.
Right. Because this is supposed to be tax reform.
Right,
if you start changing the contribution limits on these 401k plans and then tell people, oh, well, then you just should go put your money in a Roth IRA, you actually complicate their personal financial situation rather than make it easier. And you also aren't even coming up with that much revenue if you start tinkering with this. Overall, this tax break, the overall retirement tax break, cuts federal revenue annually by a little more than $115 billion. So they wouldn't even completely remove it. So you're not even talking about that big a pool of money by changing the 401k plans.
Well, for people who have been very responsible about both paying taxes and planning on a retirement, this is a very critical part of all this. And as you said earlier on the show, everybody pays taxes sooner or later. It's a question, you pay it right now, you pay it when you retire.
So it's a gimmick. It's a budget gimmick.
It's a budget gimmick. It's totally a budget gimmick. In a perfect world, there would be nothing on this. When Reagan, which I was part of the Reagan White House, when we passed the last tax bills, they were just flat taxes, and it was much, much simpler. Today it's more complicated.
So it seems to me that the whole point of the tax cut, Ed, is to help the U.S. economy, to help the U.S.
That's
the American people.
That's the premise, absolutely.
And to take away or reduce the 401k, where one of the biggest problems we have is people haven't saved enough.
Absolutely.
So anyone who thinks this should be on the table, I'd rather see less tax cuts than taking away the 401k plan. I think that's a non-starter.
I think it'll be a non-starter too, but I'm not sitting in the room when all this stuff's going on. I'm like all of us here. We just basically read, and I think clearly the president understands the political pressures that these people are on, and he made it very clear that he's, including last night with Lou Dobbs, that it's not going to happen again.
Well, what I said it on Friday on Twitter. I said it on Bulls and Bears on the news channel on Saturday. I think what's pretty clear is you mess with money going into the stock market, you will tank the stock market. And it's at an all-time high, and we know how important that is to the president as kind of a poll measure, if you will.
Well, equally as important, there's a lot of people who do have the 401ks, and they won't quite understand why this is happening because there's no rational reason for it. And I think to a certain extent there'll be a real political backlash. The state and local taxes also is another issue, but it's not across the country. This is across the country. There's a lot of people who've paid into this. A lot of people planning on this, and I think it just creates confusion. You don't need to have any more confusion.
I need to lay down. I need to put my head down on the desk because here are Republicans who won't fix Social Security. They won't even talk about it. So you won't fix Social Security, but that's not going to be there because it's going broke. So then you're going to hurt and discourage people from saving in their 401k plans. That is just incredibly illogical.
Well, don't try and make Republicans think logically or Democrats think logically. They're part of the Congress, and the Congress does not think logically. At this point in time, I think there is unanimous on the Republican side. We want a tax bill. We have to have a tax bill. The president wants it. Congress wants it. And I think without the Democrat support, they've got to basically, paste and cut and do all the rest of things without doing as much damage as possible to the constituencies you're talking about.
Do you think there's any odds of bipartisanship here? Because
zero.
Anytime when you watch the poll numbers,
Zero.
But anytime you ever see the approval rating of Congress increase, it's when there's any sort of element of bipartisanship, which I think, Americans are really sick of Congress not being able to get anything
done. The last time,
I've
been around the game, as I've said many times, for 50 years. The last time there was bipartisanship was when I was in the White House, and you had Southern Democrats who are now Republican seats who are more than willing to sit down and negotiate.
You had Dan Rostenkowski at House Ways and
Means. Bradley and a whole variety of people. It's just not there anymore. Today, it's a very polarized election. The votes, it's very narrow, the margins, and 218 is coming fast and furious. So my sense is Democrats are hopefully going to, from their perspective, get a majority again, which I don't think is going to happen. Republicans are going to hold on in a hard-fought battle, and they're not going to do anything to basically offset that. So it's going to be the polarization is going to continue.
But you see the polarization, one thing we haven't even brought up yet, the polarization within the Republican Party itself, with Jeff Flake, with Bob Corker. There's so much anger and rage and vitriol at the president and the president at these individuals who he feels like are attacking him. Have you ever seen anything like this, Ed?
As I said, I've only been around 50 years. Maybe 200 years ago there might have been something like this. But
like when Hamilton gets shot.
I teach a course, the American presidency at Hofstra, and this, as I said to my students at the beginning, this is a presidency that's very unique. It may succeed. I think it will. But I think at the end of the day, there's never going to be one like it again.
Shout out to Hofstra, if I may.
Good. Great school, as you know.
Well, John Podhoretz in the New York Post, I absolutely adore him. He writes in this opinion piece, sorry, Senator Flake, Trump is the new normal. And we're being told if we refuse to accept that this is the new normal, as Flake and others urge us to do, Trumpism will eventually be expelled from the body politic. For many of us, this is comforting, but it's a delusion.
It's a total delusion. I think Senator Flake, and I preface this by saying when I helped Kelly Ward, who was running against him, she was 25 points ahead of an incumbent senator. So, I mean, he really didn't have much of a choice of either being in a knockdown, drag-out race, probably losing or give it up. He clearly and the president are not on the same wavelength, and I think to a certain extent Corker's a similar situation. And they move on. It's just that's the way life is. And I think to a certain extent both of those seats we can hold. We'll add new members and add more members. The critical thing Republicans have had to fight from the beginning is there's not enough Republicans and not enough money to do all the things they want to do.
Do you think that there will be additional senators or congressmen and women that are going to, in the Republican side, speak out against Trump following Flake and Corker, or do you think the opposite will take effect?
You do so at your own peril.
They don't want to lose their job.
Right. Trump is the leader of this party, and I think at the end of the day, people are now, whether they like it or don't like it, it's the reality, and he has a lot of supporters out there across the country, and especially in the Republican base.
It is so good to see you.
Thank you.
Can you get back to Washington and talk some sense into these people, please?
Well, Maria was down there. She's in Saudi Arabia today. Lou Dobbs was down there yesterday. Hopefully the Fox Business influence is going to have an impact. Yeah,
you need a nose clip to be in D.C. these days. Thank you so much, Ed.